And hello everyone, and welcome to Monday Musing 70, believe it or not. Yes, I've done 70 of these things. Whoa, I'm getting some feedback. Ralph, is that you?
No, it should be sorted. Sorry.
Okay, hello. Anyway, so I've got Ralph with me, as you may have noticed. And over on my side there as well, we've got the Games Workshop colour paints washing around at the side. I'm definitely getting a bit of feedback, Ralph, so I'm not quite sure what's happening there, mate, but it's a little bit of an echo. So anyway, let's kick off by reviewing the chat. While I review the chat, I'll have a quick look at what people are saying. I think we've got Coleman and Patrick in there, who seem to have spent a great deal of time debating the weather. It's always good to do, as we're about to have the worst downpour in UK history, I think, over a 4-hour period. I think they're forecasting a month's worth of rain in 4 hours, so that should be an interesting time for us all. We've of course got the ever-present Patrick is in there as well, and a nice bit of German chat between the crowds there. I'm sure they were enjoying themselves, and I know that Patrick is going to be joining us at the doubles tournament at the end of June as well, so he's partnering up with Rachel, so he's working beavering away on his new tournament army. I'm not sure whether I should say what it is or not. We'll see. And Derpimus Maximus is in there as well. So thank you very much, Derpimus, and Daryl as well for joining us. That's very nice. It's a quiet night tonight. I've been away for a few weeks, and usually when I've been away for a couple of weeks, and you come back, it's always a bit of a quiet night. Oh, Ralph, you just blew my eardrums out with your tooty pipe again. Honestly. Just have a break. Have a break.
That's what I'm having. Nervous breakdown.
Okay, here we are then. We're going to go into tonight's show. But before, I think Derpimus Maximus says he's just been treating himself to some stuff. Says he's feeling a bit flush right now, so he's ordered some new toys, which is the chameleon paints. I'm assuming you mean the Green Stuff World chameleon paints. And some other fluorescent paints as well. So I've been working with a watercolour fluorescent paints on a couple of stuff as well. They're really interesting. And of course my Esches are going to look like they're going to be in a heavy metal band, or at least a hair metal band, should I say. And David Ellis 636 says Sup Pete's and DJ the Lucky One's joining us as well. So there you go. There's a crowd of us in, and that's certainly enough for a show anyway. I'm going to be talking a little bit. I know that, Ralph, you've gone full range. You were one of the few people to get their order in fast. We're going to be talking a little bit about the paints, really. I've got some stuff on my desk. So here we go. Look, here's a fellow that I quickly put together using the new paints. And this thing was, I think, probably about 3 minutes. About 3 minutes to get to that stage. So we'll come back to him in a bit. And I've also got some experimentations with a new colour paint over a metallic base as well. Yeah, you know, that takes some work, definitely. And we might be having a look around at what some other people have been doing online as well. We do have a full set of paint coming to Wargamer Online. And we're going to do a little bit of a special show. So Rachel is going to join me for a live show and do a 2-hour 20 skinks. That's the plan. 20 skinks in 2 hours is what she's going to attempt. So
That'll
for those of you, it'll be very interesting. For those of you who know Rachel, then she's generally relied on other people for the painting of models and the building of models and the basing of models. Myself and Jack, last couple of nights ago now, over the weekend, we put together a box of 20 skinks for her and 3 of the Ripidactyls as well. The Ripidactyls are going to get an airbrush paint because they're being done to match their existing colour scheme. And then on... oh, that's such a loud keyboard, Ralph.
Sorry.
And then it's just... And then once we've got those airbrushed Ripidactyls, we are going to be... It's the skinks that we're going to be painting using the new colours. So it's going to be 2 hours from start to finish. They will be primed, ready for her. They're built, ready for her. And we're going to go right down from opening the pots and seeing what can happen. And I think that's going to be Friday night this week. That's what it's looking like at the moment. So Friday night, look out for that show. Tomorrow night, Rachel's testing her army out. I don't think we'll be doing a show on that. She's just going to be doing a game, but you never know. We might dial in for a little bit, so look out for a show tomorrow night just for some fun. But we'll see. We'll see. Hello from the States, says Joel Miller. Thank you very much for joining us from the States, Joel. It's good to see you. So Ralph, should we start? Should we start talking about contrast? I think we're going to do a 50-50 show tonight. We'll spend half of the time talking about the contrast paints, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the announcements on General's Handbook. It looks like that's going up for pre-order this weekend. I don't know whether they've actually said that or not, but the first leak is... they've said it, have they? I was going to say, as soon as they put that first piece of content out, usually you're kind of the next weekend away from pre-orders, so... We'll be expecting to see General's Handbook. And there's some interesting stuff in there. Some stuff we were expecting. Certainly expecting stuff around expanded mercenaries after the box set. I think it was No, it wasn't Loon Curse that had mercenaries in, was it?
We talked about it on... we talked about it in the other show. I can't remember.
Maybe it was Loon Curse. Maybe.
I think it was. I think it
is Loon Curse where you get the mercenaries. Is it? Anyway, doesn't really matter at this stage. Wherever the mercenaries appeared, then why can't I? You know what? It wasn't Loon Curse. Of course, it wasn't. It was the not Malign Sorcery, but the other one that came out.
True.
Forbidden Powers.
Yeah, Forbidden Powers.
Yes. Forbidden Powers is where
there was one warband in there that you could ally. Yep.
Coleman's been so kind to say Forbidden Power, but because of that wonderful 20-second delay, you're probably screaming at us for the next 20 seconds. Okay, so right, let's talk about the contrast paints first and foremost. So what I'm going to do is show these two examples I've done, and then Ralph, we're going to have a chat about what possessed you to put a full order in before everybody else ran out of stock. But let's talk about this. I'm going to bring this camera up here for the close-up, and I'm going to do my best to position it there. Now, I am going to stress, this was done just by charging into my local Games Workshop store in Leamington. Top bloke there, if you haven't been into the GW in Leamington, Steve, who used to feature quite regularly on the channel, but now is a Games Workshop guy, obviously. That's why you don't see much of Steve anymore, because he's an official GW guy. But I still pop in the store, we still have a lot of fun together, and we still do gaming together, but unfortunately just not on camera. So, popped into the local GW store, he'd got his demo set, basically, and they were doing the painting demo day, and I had less than 20 minutes before I needed to head off for an appointment. I'd say I was sat for about 5 minutes maximum when I painted this, because as ever, myself and Steve were having a little bit of chat about the tournament and what was going off in the world, so that took some time. So what went off here, I think the main thing is I got two models. I got this little fella here, which is the Marine, the Primaris Marine. And we decided to go like uber colourful with him, and really that was a test. So this is a spray of lead belcher, followed by putting the colours over the top. We'll revisit that one because this is the traditional one. Here you can see the undercoat. So this is the warmer undercoat. This is one coat of brown. Let's just put that out of the way before we get any further. This was one coat of brown, and then these little stripes on the trousers were actually picked up with a different colour. And then this was actually several coats. So this was using the greens. I was kind of mixing the different greens together, and I was using them not so much as a wash, I was using them more as a glaze. Now bear with me, I was working incredibly quick. So, you can't expect the edges to be absolutely brilliant and all the rest. But as you can see, this was, I think this light colour here, that was how the first sort of layer came out. And then I was kind of layering up a bit of the extra greens and those kind of things. And then I was introducing some of the yellows and oranges. And I really like this bit here. This was my favourite bit. This is after the green coat had gone on. And then I just put a blob of the Iliandan yellow on top of there, and it kind of pushed the green to one side and almost drove these back to yellow again. So you got these little maggots and the yellow sort of I think there's 3 nodules, which Nurgle of course is famous for. So like I say, this entire thing was a 3-minute paint job, and I'm being rather cruel on myself because I'm zooming right into it. But if I was to just kind of pull back on the camera a little bit and kind of give you an idea of how that looks from a distance, when it's on tabletop, and I think this is what these paints are about. When I say the paints are about getting people to put the painted models on the tabletop as rapidly as possible, I was pretty pleased with that outcome, to be honest. Like I say, 5 minutes maximum to get one dude done. You could literally sit and in the space of an hour and a half have a unit of 20 done. I'm pretty certain of that, if you were just working through and batch painting them. And that's pretty good going if you're kind of happy with that. Personally, I am going to be all over the contrast paints, but I'm going to be over them for slightly different reason. It's more about adding them to the arsenal of paints rather than it just using them in isolation. But again, I think as a starting point, that was pretty cool. I'm just going to pull back in then just to sort of see what happened with this fellow. So as I said, this was a metallic spray, and we were just layering up a single coat of various different colours over the top of the metallic to see what happened. To be honest, I think this kind of yellow came out the most interesting. It created this like weird kind of almost non-metallic metallic gold. And that's a strange old effect. You could definitely layer up a couple of darker browns and then maybe spotlight a couple of white, and you've got a kind of metallic non-metallic, because it's still got the shine of the metallic, and yet if you highlight it up, it's gone. What really isn't showing up on camera is it's actually gone quite matte. So you could kind of almost layer it up, and I think you'll create some interesting techniques with that. It's certainly, I like how this came out for Caradrons. So this has really got me thinking about maybe I can do something different with my Caradron Overlords. So rather than going for the different metal colours, I am actually going to basically lead belcher spray those guys and then do different layers, and in a similar technique to this, don't just stop at one colour but layer additional colours up to create different toning, and like I say, create a non-metallic metallic. That's the idea. So we'll see. That's what happened. That's where I was at. I had a lot of fun with them. You'll be seeing more of them on the channel, because like I say, we're going to be doing this show with Rachel hopefully on Friday, where she paints 20 skinks in 2 hours, and I think I'm going to create some kind of on-screen countdown, so we'll work out whether she gets there or not. Let's check the chat, and then I want to come to you, Ralph, really, because hopefully with that little bit of delay you've seen what I'm talking around now. I don't know, I'm hoping you did. 12 Neef says, I like the contrast. Some colours are better than easier than others. I put an order in, need the primers, not sure which primer I like better. Amit comes in, question, is the medium for diluting and washing the contrast paint similar to Larmium medium? Yes, it is. That's the quick answer, to be honest. It looked a little bit more opaque when it was being mixed than Larmium. Larmium's slightly more translucent, and that looked a little bit more opaque. I didn't play around with it much, I am going to be honest. And I did play around with adding water to the paints to see what happens. And nothing exploded, I have to say that. It did dilute the paint. It changed the property of how it flows slightly, but I'm still thinking with water in it, that is another technique in terms of for glazing, definitely. So I don't think you have to kind of just go by the rule, never add water. Certainly don't add water to the pot though, because that way trouble lies. Ooh, excuse me for the yawn. Question, did the washer's shades in the standard range mix well with the contrast range? I didn't try that, Amit. So, and I know that certainly it's the kind of thing that when we get the full set through this week, I might do a couple of live shows where literally we just play with some of the different colours, but by the time I get them through, most people will start to receive theirs anyway. Although, of course, when I say most people who manage to get their order in, they've got different ones specifically for the contrast paints, says Coleman. If you're talking about the medium, then yes, it is different. Dave says, going to use the contrast as glazers. Talking of which contrast paints replace the old four glazers? Gilliman blue, Bloodletter red, Lamentas yellow, Waywatcher green. I think the truth is none of them really are a direct replacement. You need to work it a little bit. So definitely from a Lamenter's Yellow point of view, I think the closest you've got is the Iliandan. But straight out of the pot, it's got way more pigment. So you would need to use the dilute to get back towards what you would consider Lamenter's Yellow. And even then, I've not tested them side by side and let them dry. That was just looking through that. Guilliman Blue, it's not there's an ultramarine blue in there, but it's not that one, definitely. I would suspect the ultramarine contrast, I think, is a little bit duller, in less hue than the glaze. So yeah, I'd have to have a think about that and maybe look through the range to see if I could find them for you. We might return to that as Ralph's doing some chat. I've secured all 34 paints from Entoyment Wargaming and Hobby Store, and they have 5 bundles less, says Stuart. So listen, if you're listening now and you want the bundle, then you can get on to Entoyment Wargaming and place your order, says Stuart Noble. So there you go. Somebody's still got the range. Ralph, okay, I've talked for quite a bit now. So what happened to you in the space between I don't know whether I'm bothered about these things at all to, hey, Phil, I ordered every single one of them?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, the more I started watching a lot of videos from painters that I like that have been present at Warhammer Fest, and they got me thinking about the way they're using those paints or thinking about using those paints. And then in the aftermath of Fest, they came out with a couple of videos because, of course, they came away with some of the paints or most of the paint range with them. And that convinced me that the range is going to be, as you rightfully said, another tool in the arsenal of mediocre painters such as me. They'll be great. They'll be a great tool for beginning painters, to be honest, because you can pump out armies relatively quickly to a decent standard, get them on the table, and play with your toys, which is something that was needed in the first place. What really kicked me over the edge was when I saw a video of Pete the Wargamer.
Yeah.
Where he played around with them on a Stormcast and a Space Marine, I think it was. And the results that he got using those paints with, a little bit of dry brushing and a couple of, very, very selective additional highlights are very spectacular. And we've had a discussion in our local club here about how we can promote Age of Sigmar a bit more in the area. And we've come up to the conclusion that we needed to reach out and stage as many demo games as we can. And then, of course, the problem is you can't do it with only 2 or 3 armies around. You need to have a multitude of armies. So we all agreed that we'd be going out and do each of us 2 or 3 armies of 1,000 to 1,500 points to have a large enough pool of demoable armies out there. And obviously, we need to paint them.
Yeah.
And that basically led me to think, hang on a minute, let's get down from my high horse of a painter's perspective. They don't need to look perfect for that type of thing because they're going to be banged up and played around with and toyed around with anyway. So that might be a good thing. And when they became available for pre-order, to be fair, for 15 minutes I was scratching my head. Do I take that paint? Do I take that paint? Do I take that paint? And then I just went, sod it. I'm just going to get them all. If I don't like any of them, I might as well offset them on eBay. I'm sure they will sell if I don't like them.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So yeah, that's when I went from not sure to let's give them a shot. Because let's face it, I've been playing around with a couple of the paints that we've got that I'm using already that are highly pigmented, and the contrast paints are nothing new. There's nothing you can't get done with a highly pigmented paint and add a little bit of flow improver and a little bit of slow dry to them to have them act in a similar way, in a similar fashion. It's just playing around with them. the war game, the watercolor paints come to mind. They're highly pigmented, gel based, and the scale 75s. But and again, they're pre-mixed, so one thick coat. Well, why not?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely something going off with the paints. 2 seconds while I just stop my screens turning off. They are. I agree with you. They're not in terms of what you can actually do with them. That's not unique. You can work with scale 75. You can definitely work with the gel paints and watercolors and put flow aid into them and those kind of things, and turn them more into glazes. So it can be done, but like you say, these are straight out the box, and I think that's the big revelation. And from what I've seen of the range, they are consistent straight out the pot, if you know what I mean. Of the 7 or 8 colours I've tried out of the 30 odd range, and I think I've probably actually tried about 10 of the colours out of the 30 range, they all behaved very, very similar to each other, and sometimes across different colours you get different behaviour. I think the blue was interesting. The ultramarine blue was quite thick compared to some of the others, and that surprised me, but you do have to get used to putting that thick coat on and then letting that whatever that gel based carrier is to dry, and then the paint just shrinks down to the model, and lo and behold, you've got a great solid colour on the model. That takes some getting used to not layer it up, to just blob it on, sort of thing. So it is interesting. So some of them behaved slightly different, but not noticeably different. And the fact you can just pull them straight out of the bottle makes absolute sense.
One of the usages that came straight to my mind was, hang on a minute, there's a 34 color paint range of almost ready-made glazes for you. You just add the medium that they pull out with them, and you've got 34 different glazes, which is a painting style that I'm using a lot lately. Is putting an ice zenithal down, and then just glaze on top of them, and then highlight it up a little bit if needed, and then put some glazes, some shadows in if needed, and done.
Well, I've brought up this image next to us, actually, because I think this is interesting. This is Darren Latham. So for those of you who don't know who Darren Latham is, he's one of Games Workshop's designers, but he's also an incredible painter. If you're anywhere near any of the Warhammer 40k Facebook groups and all the rest, you've probably seen posts from Darren Latham, and he also has his own blog as well. And it's razaminipainting.blogspot.com. So you need to check that out. So that's RAZZA minipainting.com. Check his blog out because it's impressive. This guy is an incredibly talented person. I've met him a couple of times actually, and we've had a good old chat about some of the design processes he went through, because he designed some of my favourite miniatures inside Rogue Trader. He's a big movement force behind Gene Stealer Cults. So basically a lot of my favourite models this guy has designed. And like I say, he also does some incredible painting, and this was something he posted up on his blog and also to a couple of Facebook groups. And it's a numbered grid. You can't see the number 1 and the 4 and the 7 down the side there, but you get the point. And I just wanted to show this really because he kind of talked it through. This number 1 here, that's the Wraithbone spray. So it's the slightly warmer spray Wraithbone, isn't it? I think that's the warmer one, or is that no? That's the colder one actually.
No, the Gracie is the colder one, and
is it the Gracie? So the Wraithbone is okay. So a little bit of warmth in there, and
what
he's saying basically.
Sorry, he was using Corex white on that one, if I read it correctly.
No. But we'll come back to that in a moment. Well, he says pure white light, but okay, so he starts with number 1 Wraithbone spray, which is what he says here. And basically all contrast paints were thinned with a new contrast medium during the process, and then he talks through the stages. Stage number 2 is Nazdrag yellow. So and again, you can see he's choosing where to put it. This isn't just using it to wash it over, he's actually selecting where to paint it as a glaze. So this is not using it as a paint on thick and wash. Number 3, Snakebite leather, so he starts to add in the recesses there. Number 4, Fireslayer fresh, so he's bringing this little bit of warmth in there with the red. 5 is Cygor brown, so now he's really pushing the contrast up on this non-metallic metallic effect. Black Templar to give us some solid shadow points now underneath this ridge here. You can see he spotted a couple of pieces in here. Number 7 down here is using Lianden yellow glaze all over. So this will be a watered down glaze that are used to bring everything to tone it back into each other. And you can see it does kind of mute it all down again.
Oh.
And then on stage 8 is Wraithbone base paint as a highlight. So he comes back in with that Wraithbone base paint. No doubt, I would suggest he's probably used the medium, because he says he used it during all stages of the process, and I think it would, because if you stuck that base coat straight on, that would have been a much harsher highlight down the leg there. And then that final stage is a pure white highlight. So I'm assuming there is a white in the range, but I don't think he used that. So maybe he did use something like Corax then at that point, did he? Is it which one of the whites has gone? One of the whites has gone. So actually, no, it wouldn't be Corax, because that's the spray, of course, and it wouldn't be Ceramite, I think. So it's most likely the other one, which I can never quite remember which one it is. So we'll move on.
I mean, it just goes to show you how this range shows two things. The paint ranges are constantly evolving, and making it easier for hobbyists to get more models painted and get rid of the paint. And B, that highly pigmented paints are the way forward into the future, because the existing GW painting system, base coat, wash, clean up the wash, highlight with layers. That's using their regular paints, which are less pigmented, and it's a perfectly fine painting system, but it takes a hell of a long time. Whereas if you've got a highly pigmented paint in your hands, such as the contrast paints, you can do a whole wide panoply of things with them, by either thinning them down or using them straight out of the pot. And I think that's a very good step from GW into that direction.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely spot on. I mean, what's interesting about this, though, is normally the high pigment paints have been the sort of purview of the pro painter, because they're notoriously difficult to work with. And yet what they've done here is introduced a high pigment range that's actually really easy for the beginner to use. I mean, the right beginner, right from I've never painted a model before, straight out the pot, put a big blob of coat on. One of the biggest challenges for beginners is thinning their paints and layering them up. So if you can actually get away with just dousing a big thick coat on and it still produces shades and highlights, it's pretty impressive. I just want to come to some of Darren's narrative in his post. He says, you can see that most of the techniques involved a lot of glazing the colours over each other. Rather than highlighting in stages as you would a normal paint, this involved working backwards essentially. So starting with the larger areas of lighter colours and then shading down with less paint. As with all non-metallic painting, the real trick is when you add those final white highlights and hot spots to trick the eye. I'm pretty happy with the results, and compared to my other non-metallic painting, it was much quicker, although a little messier, if I'm to be honest. I'm sure with some more practice with the paints, this will improve. So thank you for Darren. I've just stolen your graphic and taught you through it, but I thought what you'd done was a fantastic example, really, of what can be achieved with a paint. If anybody is an intermediate pro painter, sort of whatever you want to call yourself, and you're looking at the paints and going, they're not for me because these are aimed at beginners, then I think as you can see in the hands of somebody like Darren, how non-metallic can be achieved. I think it's pretty damn impressive. So Coleman says, if you're going to go through 9 stages, do you really need a contrast paint? Well, the point is, as we've said, they are an out of the pot, ready mixed glaze. All you've got to do is add a bit of medium. So yeah, if you want to paint and get that result, then you're going to go through 9 stages. Could you use somebody else's paint, or could you use the original paint? The original paints, no, because the pigment level isn't there. Simple as that. You need higher pigment, so you'd be looking at an alternative brand. Whereas what you've got here now is, if you like the GW paint and you want to use GW paints, they're available with you under one brand. And if you're expanding your GW range, the great thing about these things, of course, is they are aimed at the standard army color ranges. So these are colors that are ultramarine. For the ultramarines, for instance, is tonally correct for slapping on your model and achieving the pretty much accepted main coat for Ultramarines, or the main colour. Thordalim says, are they thin as well? Consistent. Are they thin? Right, well, this is where you get into something interesting, really. As I said, the property of the paints are quite different. They have a texture of a gel paint that's been watered down, and if you've not used gel paints before, that's pretty much hard to imagine.
You're going to find it strange the first time you're going to use them.
Yeah, how can we describe a gel paint? I think there's a higher surface tension, for want of a better word. They tend to be thicker, and the gel acts as a pad between pigments. So when it dries, that's why you can put it on thick, and yet when it dries, there's only a thin coat of paint, because the gel is like a carrier. And if you've ever seen gel underneath an electron microscope, you know, it's more or less, once it dries out, there's nothing there, basically. So that's the idea of that. So if you've ever seen the glass, the aerogel glass that's used by NASA and all the rest, you know, I think it's 99.9% air, and the rest is the gel, which they've cleverly managed to dry out without it shrinking, because what happens when gels dry is they shrink. If you don't know anything about the process, check out Aeroglass, because it does go through explaining what happens to gels when they dry, and it also goes through a process of how they avoid it shrinking when they create the Aeroglass. So it's like a weird ceramic that's see-through. Really interesting stuff. But it does kind of explain what's going on in the gel paints. There's a lot of body to them. There's a lot of surface texture. You put it on, and underneath a microscope, your paint's that thick. And when the gel kind of dries out, it reduces down and just leaves the pigment on the model. So Warcolors have had a gel range for some time now. I really love their paints. But again, if you put them straight on out the pot, what tends to happen is although there's a lot of gel, there's also quite a bit of pigment. So you can end up with kind of a surface texture. So you do need to work with Warcolors, you know, to thin them down and to put flow aid in and stuff like that. But as far as I've seen for all of these Thordalim, straight out the pot, mate. You just daub it on, and it's an incredibly consistent effect. Wow, that was a long answer. Have you ever checked out the aerogel? You need to check it out. It's really cool. Anyway, that's me showing my science geeking off. Okay, well, we're halfway through the show. I think we've talked about the paints a little bit. How do you fancy spending a bit of time looking at what's going off on the community site? General's Handbook just round the corner. That's got to make people happy, surely. So we've got announced on the website today, in fact. So this was, or was it today? Posted on the 9th.
It's yesterday.
It's yesterday, is it? So we've got General's Handbook 2019. Split into two main parts, so this is interesting. You've got the handbook itself, which is a guide to gaming, and then essentially a separate set of pitch battle profiles. So what they've done is separate out the book, which gives you the rules and the missions and all of the new cool stuff that they're doing. And then if you're into match play and you want your points, there's a second book where you go to for all of that stuff, basically. That's what I'm going with. Narrative gamers will enjoy tactical and thematic depth. So we've got narrative play, open play, and match play. What have they really been announcing in this one? I'm just having a quick look. We've got tweaked pitch battles, new triumphs, command abilities, and available to your army and terrain features, and even more depth and choice for thriving competitive scene. Meanwhile, meeting engagements lets you enjoy the thrills of match play in a fraction of the time with smaller armies. So let's just pick through some of those bits before we scroll down. So tweaking to pitch battles, new triumphs, new command abilities available to the army, and terrain features. That's three overarching rule systems, for want of a better word, that can have quite a bit of an impact on the game.
Yep.
So triumphs I rarely used in my gaming circle. It'll be interesting to see what they've done with those. I'm hoping that they've made them more accessible or easier to remember or something, because I always kind of tend to forget them. Command abilities, I like the way it's moved to command abilities being driven by needing the command points that you build up. I can see that as being a mechanic they can expand upon. So for me, that you'd need access to be able to use more of them. I'd like more of the generic ones, because in 40k you can kind of use those a little bit more generic for roles and stuff like that. Maybe, who knows? And then what else have we got in there? Something around terrain features, which has always been a challenge. Both when I've done the tournaments, you always get that 50-50 moment at the start of a game where you go, "Do you want to use the terrain rules?" And half of the people go, "Nah," because they just makes them forget. The other half say yes. Personally, I like using terrain rules. I think it adds a unique dynamic to each one of the missions, because you can play a mission twice, but if the terrain falls completely differently in terms of what it does, then
It's a different game.
Yeah, it's a different game. So I think it's a shame that people don't play terrain rules. So again, I hope. Are they saying they've expanded them, or have they changed them? So what is it? Well, it's kind of under the new bit: new triumphs, new command abilities available, and terrain features. So new terrain features. I hope that might be expanded, or it might be replacing. Don't know at this stage.
I think it's more of an expansion to what we've already got.
I hope so.
Because
Meanwhile,
don't forget,
sorry,
there's a lot of new terrain that's been coming out, so I think that will pull all that in.
True, and the new terrain is absolutely gorgeous. I love. It's made me think a little bit harder about my terrain, because I want to put more elevation onto my games. And we've just played a battle in the last 24 hours, and we were using the lovely Shaiish terrain that I built, and it was only kind of halfway through the game I realized that the terrain is all on the same level. So I'm going to take some of the Shaiish stuff and move it up a good 1.5 inches, 2 inches, 50 millimeters, something like that, and kind of create a Shaiish version of some of that Azerite terrain that's just come out. Meeting engagements, Ralph, I've got to say, this thing's got me excited.
Yep.
Because, if you've watched Wargamer Online for a while, you'll probably notice that, we've played a few 1,000-point games. I actually like 1,000-point games. It's challenging to create an army at 1,000 points that, can still function against a range of opponents rather than tailoring it. So it's quite hard to squeeze an army into 1,000 points. So if it's around about that mark, at 1,000 points, we play on a 4x4 table as well. So I'll be interested to see what they do with that. Whether it's going to be like dining, because it says sort of lets you enjoy fraction of the time with smaller armies. Yeah, I wonder if they're going to go like dining table size, because wasn't they released a mat, didn't they? That was dining table size.
Yeah, I think what they're trying to achieve is some kind of gap between the skirmish rules and a low points count match play game.
Yeah.
See?
And I like it. 1,000-point games. Myself and Jack, we've done a 1,000-point game, and we've turned it around in less than an hour. And you've still had all the dynamism of that larger game and all the challenges of the larger game. And we've played 5 turns in less than an hour. So it's great when you play that. You both need to be really switched on with your armies, but when you are switched on with your armies, you can move really quick. Jack's at the moment working through his new Free People's Army, which is just disgraceful at 1,000 points. I don't know how well they'd scale up to 2,000 points, but my goodness me, you can have some fun at 1,000 points, particularly if it's against my elite fire slayers. And the other thing he's been diligently working on his daughters, getting them ready for the tournament. If he's going to use his daughters at tournament, we're not 100% certain he is, but we've been working on these lovely beach bases to go with my Iden of Deepkin army. I know that's probably not focusing, but you get the idea anyway. So a lot of fun with those. So I'm looking forward to seeing, as though we've built tournament armies at 1,000 points. It'd be great to have a format to play those smaller games, and hopefully they've done, hopefully the missions. I think this is the thing: is the missions need some kind of modification to put. The objectives are sometimes a bit far up. We've played on a 4 before, and you kind of think, I hope they come up with something that enables the missions to move quicker or something interesting. It can't just be play 1,000 points on a smaller table. They've got to have done something to even call it.
I'm sure.
Something different, haven't they?
I'm sure it's not going to be. I think what we'll see is a combination of automatic modifiers of movement abilities, shooting abilities, distance-wise, to make that work. Maybe
Work, yeah.
maybe a a top level of numbers of models you can take in a unit. For example, for the Horde armies, if you were able to take 30 in a unit, they'll probably capping that out at 15 or 10, something like that.
That's a good idea. Yeah, some kind of restriction on units, either size or amount of them or something.
To keep it
Yeah.
keep it playable on a smaller table and in a time span that is less where you just need less time to play a game.
So it says for your list writing. So that's good, Ralph. We might get a full game in at some point, one way or another. For your list writing convenience, all of the new pitch battle profiles will be printed in a separate booklet of their own, including the latest points adjustments, plus profiles for a number of compendium units, endless spells, and terrain. So, what are you expecting on a points front, Ralph? Who do you who's the winners and losers? Shall we have a guess now and we can compare? I mean, hopefully I'll be getting a review copy of this week, so maybe we can do a live show on Saturday and do a compare and contrast on your predictions.
I think the armies that have been kind of in inverted commas neglected with new army books will get a substantial reduction in points. Like Stormcast, like the Seraphim, that kind of stuff. Because in the paragraph just above, you get expanded rules for Iron Jaw, Seraphim, Wanderers, Darkling Covens, Free People, Slaves to Darkness, and Dispossessed. That tells me that these factions will not get books anytime soon. So they have to do something to make them more attractive, to get the models off the shelves. So I think those armies will see point reductions to make them give them more punch, give you more wounds per point.
Well, I mean, I hope so, because I'm working on a Darkling Coven, a couple of units to go with my Iden of Deepkin. So yeah, a few point reductions there would really make me happy. But you've got a good point there. Does that mean Iron Jaws, Seraphim, Wanderers? The Iron Jaws been out for a long time. Seraphim out for quite a long time. Not sure about Slaves to Darkness. I think is that a relatively new book, or does it?
They're included with the.
Well, they were included in the original thing, weren't they? Yeah. So it is. What's this? It's essentially the rules that were contained, inside some of the bigger Allegiance books as well, weren't we? Because we've not seen anything for. We're still going back to almost the original indexes for these things, aren't we?
Yep.
So you're right, absolutely. The meta has moved on quite a bit, so you'll expect to see those winner. I think it's fair to say you can probably look at some of the armies that haven't been seen too prevalent in the tournament scene. I think you're right to shout out Stormcast Eternals. They're meant to be the poster boys, but when you go along to any tournament, Daughters, Iden of Deepkin. I wouldn't be surprised if you see Fire Slayers, doing more and more, certainly based around large half-guard units. So, it seems like what are in the narrative, these fringe armies, if you like, are taking centre stage in the tournament scene. It would be nice to see something done for Stormcast to get them a little bit more centre stage.
I think what we're seeing right now is that we get a conscientious effort from GW of developing the narrative and open play side a little bit independently of the tournament scene side. And that's also, the reason why I'm saying that is because the split in the General's Handbook between the points and the rules side, because that will allow them to adjust more quickly. Nothing will stop them putting out new points tables every 6 months.
Yeah, true. For your list writing convenience, as I said, all those have been put in a book at the end, and then we've got this lovely pack shot here. So we can see there's the two books, the General's Handbook 2019. Then you've got the profiles. I'm assuming that's battle profiles, maybe 2019. Looks like we've got some in this Warlord edition. There are a few extra things like objective markers. Not 100% certain what those little axes are meant to represent, but there you go. Oh,
That's
hold on a
stars,
second. If you look at
stars
that,
strike markers.
look at those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 symbols there. Command point, command point, command point, command point. So those 6 symbols looks like a bush, a vine, some rocks, a helmet, a swirly thing, and a star. Could that be terrain then, maybe? Because you know you've got the terrain dice with symbols on. They look similar to that.
It could also be tokens for being affected by spells or something.
They could be, but yeah, you don't. Yeah, they could be. I'm thinking generally because it's General's Handbook. It'd be something from that generic set, though. You know, something that everybody has access to. Then there's a bunch of cards. We've got Army Generator, Hidden Agenda, Arcane Objectives, and a Close Quarters Map. Heaven knows. So it says a version of the General's Handbook. Hold on, here we go. There's even a bigger close-up of this stuff, isn't there? So we've got the 9-inch rules, the Mystic Shields. Yeah, there is no indication over what those symbols mean either, and they're different as well, aren't they?
Oh, 24 terrain markers. You're right.
Okay, so Mystic Shield marker, 24 terrain marchers that you'll should never accidentally charge into deadly terrain again. Oh, right. Are they actually the original terrain symbols off the dice? They are.
I wouldn't know.
I'm going to be back in a second, Ralph, because I've got the dice. Give me a second.
So now you'll see me dancing in the meantime until Phil returns with his dice. Come on, Phil.
I'm coming back. They are the symbols. So let me just bring up the lovely terrain dice. There you go. So as you can see, they are indeed the symbols.
Yeah, Coleman confirmed it also. It's the.
Okay. Well, there you go. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're the existing terrain markers. 24. Okay. Hold on a second. That's the reverse of that. So those symbols, there's the command points, look. There's the objective markers, there's the objective markers, there's the command points. There's those 3 axes, whatever they are. So that's the reverse. So they are terrain markers then.
Yeah.
So those symbols will represent new terrain of some description. You've got some kind of thorns and stuff like that. Okay, that's interesting. Meanwhile, 30 battle plan cards are great for keeping track which mission you're playing, including no fewer than 20 options for your pitched battles, plus battle plan cards and meeting engagement and narrative play. Lastly, 135 small format cards allow you to take full advantage of a number of rules in the book for easy reference. However, you play the Warlord edition promises to make your games a little bit easier. So, okay, big Warlord edition with everything in it. I'd love that, but you know, we'll see. It looks impressive.
It's probably going to be somewhere around the 80 pound mark.
Yeah, probably. So that's what I'm. If that was yesterday's post, today's post is a Battle Sister bulletin, then, isn't it? Oh,
today's post,
of course. Yeah, we did, of course, today have the General's Handbook one as well. Sorry, Ralph. Was that what you were about to say?
Yeah, it's about.
I knew we'd seen something else because there was some chatter around mercenaries, and that's how I'd seen it. I got pretty giddy, to be honest, around mercenaries. They've got some interesting rules. We've got this disruptive presence. If your army includes a mercenary unit at the start of your hero phase in the first battle round, you do not receive 1 command point. I really like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's thematic. If you get an extra punch by getting mercs in there, but if you do, hey, they don't listen to what you tell them necessarily. So one less command.
And they're even a little bit disruptive because they've not trained with your army. They're just doing their own thing off a corner. We've got the Sons of the Lich Master. So there's 10 companies. So let's just get that in there already. We've seen 2 so far. This is Greyford Lodge. Yeah, we've seen that. The Tenebrous Court. We've seen that one from Forbidden Powers. But there's a couple more here then. The Sons of the Lich Master. Or Lich Master. I always grew up saying Lich, but we can say Lich if you want. What does it do? This is a bunch of skeleton warriors, basically. A corpse cart, a necromancer, zombies. So combined with a free guild force, they'll be a great way to flesh out, no pun intended, armies hailing from the realm of death. Add 1 to attack characteristics of weapons used by zombies or skeleton warrior units from this mercenary company while they're wholly within 18 inch of the necromancer. So this, and add 1 to attacks is huge.
Yeah.
That's just doubled. For a lot of those things, they've only got 1 attack anyway, so you've just kind of doubled your army anyway. And there are already mechanics within undead armies to push their attacks up. So
Yeah, but don't forget those are the mercs. So it's not the army mechanics will not necessarily work for the merc detachment.
Good point.
So
good point.
I'm not sure whether you'll be able to combine them. I don't think so, to be honest.
Leech, says Dave Dodge. Grudge Brothers, Ale Guzzler Gargants. So we've got a bunch of these guys. Look,
I love those. I love those.
So
you're right.
You can have up to three Gargants to your army. Great stuff. I love that. Mercenary company. So I love the idea of that. I was thinking, could I do a Fire Slayer one and give them all massive beards? So they're trying to be like giant fire slayers or something like. You know what I mean? It'd just be great fun. You can re-roll hits of 1 for attacks made by the unit within 6 inch of one other unit from the same mercenary company. You can instead roll all hit rolls for attacks made by the unit from this mercenary company that's within 6 inch of 2 other units of the same mercenary company. So these guys hang around in a gang, basically. And the sibling rivalry is very similar to the Rune Sun rule, where you get reroll hits if you are within 6 inch of another Rune Sun, basically, which is highly effective when you charge 4 Rune Suns on Magmadross into combat, as I've actually done in a game the other night. They can do a lot of damage when they're re-rolling their hits, especially if you can get a couple of runic empowerments off as well, because they're charging in re-rolling hits, re-rolling wounds.
Anything that lets you re-roll fails is always a big boon. So,
Order of the Blood Drenched Rose. I know nothing about these, Ralph. So these look like vampire models.
It's the first time I've heard of those.
Yeah, some kind of vampire. What does it? Does it actually say what the unit is? Blood Knights. So there you go, a formation of Blood Knights. And then we've got
a vampire on a night nasty. Nice.
And Nimyard's Rough Riders. Love this. So this is a unit of Pistoliers and an option for Outriders of the Free Guild General. Now, Jack's just ordered 2 boxes of the Pistoliers because he's decided his Free Guild army lacks mobility, is the word he said to me. This is after 6 of his demigriffs charged into me and made an absolute mess of me. And his general on a giant flying griffin leapt across the table and ripped the hell out of my Rune Father. But apparently his army lacks mobility.
Filth.
So he's decided to get some Pistoliers to add to it. I think he's got a point, basically, because there is definitely something to having a fast deployable unit for the second half of the game for that all-important objective grabbing. In Daughters, that's all about these little guys that sort of drop down at the end of the game, and just you only need 5 of them to drop down and secure an objective, score those important points. Fire Slayers, excuse me, so tired. Fire Slayers don't have that unit. That's the truth. You can put, say, 5 half guard and the Rune Father into Magmic Tunneling with the aim to bring them on later in the game. But the reality is that's a really expensive unit to drop down. So these Pistoliers are really quite a cool unit. They're not particularly expensive in points and give you a lot of mobility. And not bad shooting, to be honest. So it says, instead of setting up the unit on the battlefield, you can place it to one side and say it's scouting as a reserve. If you do so, at the end of your first movement, you must set that unit wholly within 6 inch of the edge of the battlefield. More than 9 inch from an enemy unit. Any number of units from this mercenary company can be set up this way. So you can literally put the entire unit, end of your first movement. You can be right on the side of if you've gone for the right flank,
an objective.
You can exactly. If you've gone for all out, a lot of the times when you've got these kind of 4 objectives in a game, my opening tactics are always based hold my own and take one of theirs.
Yeah.
Rather than just a slight move. Because if you do that, you've suddenly got 3 of the objectives. So if you can kind of focus on one flank and then at the same time the Pistoliers are coming on as well to give additional reinforcement there. It's good stuff. Good stuff.
You can use it as a diversion to pull some of the enemy strength away from the fourth objective, or even try to capture it if he doesn't.
Yep. And one that's possibly, most likely, pretty certainly possibly getting added to my Fire Slayers is the Black Smoke Battery. I really like these guys. So looking for a solution to enemy monsters?
I know somebody else that's itching for it.
Yeah. Well, Coleman will be pretty happy about this. So the mercenary company, consisting of 1 to 3 cannons or organ guns, with the option of a cogsmith, which I think I've got a cogsmith model somewhere, so I'm pretty exciting. I've got a gyrocopter. This is the thing. So I'm already 2 models into this. That to me means I'm already committed. This is amazing. I'd want to hit rolls for attacks by the cannons and organ guns from this mercenary company if the gyrocopter or gyrobomber from the same company is within 12 inches of the target. So you scout that little dude out. He's going, hey, it's over here. I think he's dropping flares or something, it says, doesn't he? He fires off a single rocket. Brilliant. Sorry, absolutely love it.
By the way, did you notice something in the wording of it? It looks like the mercenaries are not limited to 1 mercenary unit. As long as you can stick them within the points limits, you could have 2 or possibly more different mercenaries with your army. Because it's specifically talking about the same mercenary company. It doesn't say the mercenary company. So you could possibly, if you play a high points game, say 2,000 points or up, you could possibly get away with 2 or 3 smaller mercenary bands that you can fit in.
I think the great thing is there's room for kind of modelling fun here, isn't there? If I've got this mercenary unit that's hanging around with a Fire Slayer army, and I can kind of mess around with that. Why not give them all Mohicans? You know what? Why not take some of the Fire Slayer? So they spent too long with them, and they've started to dress like them and plait their beards like them, and all the, you know what I mean? They're kind of doing all of that. Okay, they've not gone so far that they've taken their armor off. That's not going to happen. But why not? Why not do your beard? So use some of the spare heads I've got and stuff like that. So I've got loads of spare Fire Slayer heads. I've skipped forward through a couple. I mean, there's Chaos Gargants in here as well, which looks absolutely filthy. It's got the at the double forward to victory, inspiring presence command abilities from the core rules as if they were a general. That's ridiculous. Rampagers. So these look. Are these flagellants? Are these no marauders and Warkeem? Oh wow. Okay, that's interesting. So after you set up the unit from this mercenary company, you can move it D6 inch. We've got some gut stuffers, which are just happy-looking ogres. I
love those models. I've never seen those models before.
I know they're great. The guy with the pirate hat or whatever. It's not quite like that, but yeah. What a great model. That's really cute. You can re-roll charge rolls for units from this mercenary company. However, if a unit from this company is within 12 inches of the enemy at the start of its charge phase, it must attempt to charge. Sorry. I quite like that idea of just that unit you can't quite control. They're just going to wade in. They're going to wade in and do their own things. Amit says, shucks, no organ gun spam. I think you can have organ guns in there, can't you?
Yeah, you can.
You can have organ guns as well.
The question was whether you could have more. We just talked about it, and the thing is, the mercs are going to be limited within the 400 points allies.
Yeah,
of course. The ally point limit. So whatever game you're playing, you can stuff as many of those units in there as you can, with regards to the ally points you've got. Full stop. So if you've got enough for 3 units, then you can stuff 3 units in there.
So Hurricanum will still buff the black powder battery. Nice. I think because it is just friendly units. The Hurricanum's filth. We all know it's filth. I could run a whole 2,000 point army just off the black powder battery. I've got 3 gyropommers, 1 copter. Amit says, can you have more than one black smoke battery? I don't think, it's not said at this point, has it?
I think you can. It depends how many points they are.
True. True, because by the time you've bought 3 cannons, a gyrocopter, and something, I dare say you're probably getting quite close, if not, past your allowance. Vaughan says, how do you all? Alexander comes in, I have so many new ideas for armies in my heads now. I know, tell me about it. One of the things I'm working on, I've inherited a whole bunch of Iden of Deepkin torsos. So there's no heads, there's very few arms, there's no weapons. And that's because they're being used in a conversion project of a friend. So he's building an army where all he needed was the Iden of Deepkin heads, arms, and weapons, which left him with a bunch of torsos. I got a bunch of models he needed. We've done a swapsy where he's given me these torsos in a swap for something else I was getting rid of. Which means I've got about 30 Iden of Deepkin torsos, and I've got an Iden of Deepkin army, and what I was thinking is I don't want to just add, try and put their arms and legs back on, if you know what I mean. What I want to do is use them as the opposite of what my mate is doing, as a basis for conversions. So the kind of things I've been looking at is things like the Dark Shrouds and stuff, the Dark Elf repeat bolt thrower guys. So I want to bring those into the Iden of Deepkin army, using the Deepkin torsos, but maybe using the repeater crossbows, slightly different heads, so they're kind of different but the same, and that idea of mixing it in. And I suppose that comes back to saying, could I do the black smoke battery and, give them all Mohicans, and give them all throwing axes and stuff like that. Swap some of the weapons out. Although they don't have weapons, do they? They just have stuff for firing their guns with. But even so, could I swap some of them out a little bit, or even give them Fire Slayer crews, but make them look slightly different, like a mixture of the kits. So it's Fire Slayer crews with the cannon or something like that. So there's a bit of a modelling fun to be had there. I think there's definitely something about like, come on, free people. I mean, so many of these factions are kind of like free people factions, aren't they? I mean, it's just brilliant.
That kind of burst the bubble. That kind of burst the bubble that we're going to get the Free People's Book.
Well, it'd be brilliant. It'd be amazing to see, because these are... I still love some of these models, so I hope they're around for a good time yet. The Pistoliers are such cool models. They are. Yeah, there's 2 versions. Actually, I think that's not... Yeah, that is a Pistolier unit, and they're so cool. I really love them. So I'm really pleased that Jackie's doing Free People at the moment, because there's some very cool old school models in there. And I think I showed them on one of the previous shows anyway, so I'll not go and get them now. But I really love the General he's done, and the Griff Chargers or something like that. Griff Chargers. I don't think they are called that, but they're like Griffin Riders, basically. They're amazing. And he's done a sterling job with them, and he's got 6 already, and he wants to get... I think he's got 9 already. He wants to get 3 more. He wants 2 units of 6. Because on the charge, they do a whole bunch of damage as well. They're one of those units that's really effective on the charge. Not great if they're stilling around at the end of it. Right. Okay, where are we at? Well, we're pretty much at time, Ralph. We've had a little bit of a rant and rave about the paints, and we've had a little bit of rant and rave about General's Handbook. So, General's Handbook's going up on pre-order this weekend, which means hopefully you'll be seeing a review copy from the wonderful people at Games Workshop. If I do get that in, I'll be giving it a good read this week, and what I will probably do is a live Q&A on Saturday, because a lot of people, with me having a full-time job as well, I don't always get time to actually pre-record the stuff, because a lot of the times the preview stuff comes in only 24 hours before the actual release, due to postage and all the rest, or because I'm working, I don't really get my hands on it. So one of the things I like to do now is, rather than trying to get a show recorded that night it arrives, I'll spend a bit of time reading it, get it familiar with it, and then go into a live show on the Saturday morning when the embargo closes, and that enables me to do more of a Q&A. So if you want to know more about the General's Handbook, there's a hell of a chance there's going to be a show on Saturday morning where I'm doing a live Q&A with it. So look out for that as well, folks.
You think that the doubles tournaments you're going to play, the new JHB, will be applicable?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It was. I'm pretty certain it was last time. It came out only a week before the tournament, and it was still applicable because it was this time last year. So, yeah, it's one of the reasons. Knowing that the General's Handbook was coming, it's one of the reasons we've been hesitant to finalise our lists. We've been careful because if you go exactly up to 1,000 points, if any of the units shift in the wrong direction, and by wrong I mean more expensive,
you got 1 week.
you built an entire army and approach around that, and then it all goes to pot. So we tend not to. What we've done is we have been playing a lot of the Daughters. We've been playing a lot of Fire Slayers. We've been playing a lot of Free People. I was playing a lot of Sylvaneth, but my Sylvaneth army is on loan now for the tournament. So if you see Rachel and Patrick win this tournament using my Sylvaneth, which, by the way, my gut was to go with my Sylvaneth because I think they are interesting with some of the changes they had with the box set coming out of, was it Gloomspite that you had the Sylvaneth guys in? Yes, it was. I think that's interesting. So I was all going to do that, but I gave Patrick the choice of Fire Slayers and Sylvaneth, and guess what he chose? So that's limited my army. But so if he wins with Sylvaneth, I'm going to take it as a victory anyway and insist on having half his trophy. Right. Okay, so we've been playing all of those different armies. We'll find out what happens on the day. Hopefully General's Handbook will land soon, and we can quickly trawl through and say, can we still afford the units we were planning on? Are we going to be okay? And we'll move on from there. I hope the Dreadsaurian gets its points to be more fair. Something like 200 maximum. To be honest, that's probably about right nowadays. I think there's a few factions that are definitely you're not going to see any movement on. I'll be surprised if you see any movement on things like Gloomspite, Fire Slayers. These were out very recently, and generally when those books are released, they've already got a damn good idea what they're planning on putting in the General's Handbook. So it's unlikely you'll see any shifts on any of those things.
You've got a 6-month lead at least for the General's Handbook. So.
Yeah. So you know that if these things have been released within weeks of each other, they were being worked on at the same time. So
anything pre-Christmas, there's a chance you're going to see adjustments. Anything after Christmas,
exactly. So I think we're fairly safe with Fire Slayers, and that's why we've spent a lot of time looking at a dual list of Fire Slayers. But we'll see. Super excited, says Torrentino, been putting off purchasing the General's Handbook knowing this was due soon. Well, good call, sir. Good call. You've waited at the right time. Not long now. And check the channel out on Saturday because, like I say, we'll probably be doing a live look through, and I'll give as many answers as possible to the changes that have taken place. Okay, right, Ralph. Thank you very much for joining me tonight. I'm expecting to hear great things about your paint set when it arrives.
If and when it arrives.
We'll get together and talk gaming again soon. Like I say, there might be another show this week. There's a good chance, hopefully, there's going to be a painting show on Friday night, and then we'll have a look at the General's Handbook on Saturday morning if all goes to plan.
Paint with Rachel. Be there, will be square.
Oh, it's going to be good. I'm getting all my best paintbrushes out for that.
Cool.
Patrick's just had a quick question. Did GW say anything about the new Sylvaneth battle tome still stuck in China because UK did not manage to get the Brexit done in time? No, Patrick. No news on that, I'm afraid. Night, all. Good night, Vaughan. See you later, guys. Thank you for joining us all, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.
Have a nice evening. Bye.